So, we're going to continue our series this morning on social distortion. And if there was ever a time of social distortion, it seems like now. But I'm going to begin with just an episode that happened to me yesterday. I have three grandchildren, and they are 4, 5, and 6 years old. We just got done eating dinner, and I am what is called the weak link in the family. So we're over at my house. We have this little playground in our neighborhood, and all they have to do is ask, and Papa takes them to the playground. Everybody else is tired. We're done eating, and they look at Papa and they go, "Weak link. He'll take us." And guess what? Papa takes them to the playground. And so we arrive at the playground, and the three of them have all decided at the same time they wanted to swing on the same swing. So Papa goes through all of his versions of how to solve this problem. And I thought a wrestling match would break out and help me out. So the three of them were kind of going at it. And I thought, well, they'll solve this themselves. The winner gets the swing. Yeah, that then Papa realized that's a bad idea. Then I have to explain that when I get back. Okay, to their parents. And so I thought for a minute, I thought, well, I could put all three of them on the swing at the same time. You ever seen three small children on a swing at the quickly dispatch that. Um, Thought maybe we could do rock, paper, scissors. They're 4, 5, and 6. That wasn't going to work. And the argument was ramping up. And so I was like, I got to make this decision. So rather than have them wrestle with it, rather than having them, I vacillated between two options. No one gets the swing. And I thought, nah, that'd suck. That'd be bad. I opted for my watch. And I set a 5-minute timer, put one of them on there, and said the other two go find something to do. And they swang. And so I compromised. And they were reasonably satisfied with that. But that is the essence of conflict. One swing, three people, and one person trying to figure out what to do. Did you learn as you were growing up? I'm sure you did, because all of us did, because we grew up in homes, our home of origin. You learned what I would call as a conflict style. And each of us learned it in our homes. I happened to learn the best one. Okay, you guys are not following, or I'm not making good jokes. One person is tracking with me. My conflict style in my family was compete. We competed with each other. And whoever could compete the best would win the day and get whatever it is that we were after. And my parents pretty much let us wrestle it out. And so as you grow up and you learn this behavior, you take it with you wherever you go. So each of you has a specific kind of conflict style that you take with you wherever you go. And you learned it. So the beauty of that is you can unlearn it. The beauty of that is you can change the way that you interact with people in a conflict. The beauty of that is that we don't know what other people's conflict styles are until we poke the bear, until you step into conflict with them. And so I want to talk this morning a little bit about a passage that gets used in this context in the church. It's found in Matthew 18. It's verses 15 through 17. And it is, I think, the verse is often misquoted, it is often misused, but it's also a great prototype for how to handle conflict in the church among relate people that you are in relationship with. It is not, I want to repeat this, it is not meant to be used in every context, every place, everywhere. Okay? Everybody got that? Okay. I don't believe you, but let's go with it. And I also want to say before we dive into this, just a couple of I'm going to use them as qualifiers to this conversation. Okay? There are people in the world that this never works with. You can talk to them, and they will continually and ongoingly step into and offend you and abuse you and do things. This is not referring to that. So if you're thinking in your head, oh, I know somebody and I tried this and da-da, yep, I get it. This is true. I also want to say that there are people in the world that will never ever tell you that you offended them. So you can go through life and never have anyone come up and say, "Hey, I think you offended me." You can go through life because the people around you either are intimidated or whatever. Or this is the other option is you've never done anything that somehow offended somebody. That's always an option. But if you live in the world where you think, yeah, no one's ever come up to me and said, "Oh, you offended me," or "You sinned against me," or "You did this," and I want to talk to you about it, I think you need to do some life examination because you are putting off some kind of vibe that says, "Don't do that. Don't talk to me about my faults. Don't talk to me about how I offended you because I'm not going to receive it well." Okay? So those are the things that those are the precursors or those are the caveats. All those people exist in the world. And you may know some. You may be one. I don't know. And then one other thing is that there are people that go through the world, go through life, and they live offended. They are offended. They just are. And it doesn't take much at all to set them off. And so I'm giving you all the extremes so that you're aware that there are extremes. And you may go, yeah, I'm one of those people. I'm always offended. I drive offended, just so you know. Yeah. I got arms folded and people staring at me. This is going to be great. The Q&A time, Q&R time is going to be awesome on this. Okay. So now to the passage. Okay. Okay. If your brother or sister, and so read there, your fellow Jesus followers. Okay. So your brother or sister, what he's talking about is your fellow Jesus followers, not society or people who don't follow Jesus. Sins against you, does something against you, offends you, sins against you, not against someone else, but against you. So you're not taking up somebody else's banner, you're not taking up somebody else's offense, it's your offense. Go and point out their fault, fun times, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. So the question in a culture of the world where people don't want to, first of all, admit that they've made a mistake or even address a mistake or even step into this idea of sin, this is extraordinarily difficult to do. So the question is, what does this look like? And how do you ultimately do this? And this is what this message is going to try to unpack in the next few minutes. So if you actually do this and you go to them, this is what happens. If they listen to you, you have won them over. Wow. That takes two people, not a crowd. It takes two people. You're offended. You go and say, "Hey, you sinned against me. You offended me. You did something." And what this does is this isn't just about the person who's offended, it's about the offender. You have to understand this is a two-person thing that affects a whole community. It affects a family, it affects people. And so oftentimes what happens is if somebody is really ongoingly an offensive person and does certain things all the time and no one ever says anything. No one ever says, "Hey, that's offensive. Don't do that." Takes them aside and says, "What you've done does affect other people." They go through life thinking it doesn't. And so it's not just for the offended one, it is for the community. Because there's a family works in very much a similar way, brothers and sisters. Is that I grew up in a family where the idea of saying to somebody in my family, "Hey, you offended me," was a sign of weakness. And so we didn't. There was no opportunity for reconciliation or life. There's no opportunity for change. It was just an opportunity to compete. Whether you were right or wrong was irrelevant. It was who won the argument. It was whoever won the competition would win the day. Sound familiar? It's how our culture works. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. If you can win the argument, you win the day. And if you can diminish some people in the process, you even win the day more. Not in the church, though. It's not supposed to be that way in the church. Not as we converse with one another, as we engage with one another. Now, the obvious truth is you're going to offend me, I'm going to offend you. But we've now turned to this idea of this offense uh, to a place where we go, well, if somebody talks to me about my offense, I'm just going to go to another church. I'm just going to go away. And so there's two postures that have to take place in this conversation. One of those postures is when I'm offended, I'm actually going to say something. When I'm sinned against, I'm going to say something just to the person. And then the other posture is for the person who's being, let's use the word, confronted with their own offense, with the offensive behavior. There has to be a posture of humility. There has to be a posture of, oh, I didn't mean to do that, or I'm sorry. Let me make it right. Let's forgive one another. Let's restore this relationship. If those two things don't exist, it moves to the next verse. Verse 16. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. Take along one or two. Don't tell everybody. Don't tell the planet. Don't put it on social media. Don't do any of this, by the way, on social media. Don't do this through text. Don't do this through a phone call. You can set up the meeting through text, okay? Because once you depersonalize it, once you're no longer looking them in the eye, once you've told a bunch of people, it is no longer between you and them. It is no longer private. It is much harder to gain humility. It is much harder to get forgiveness. It is much harder to change our behaviors. And so you take one or two along, one or two, one or two, one or two, not three. Nope. One or two, who can verify the sin, who can verify the offense. So it's people who have actually seen this person probably do this before. Verify the wrong. The goal is the same as the first one, to win them over, to explain their behavior is damaging to the community, it's damaging to people. What they're doing is not right. Again, if you receive it, if they receive it, you win them over. The day is won. Now only three people know. Four. The person and the people you invited along. The circle is small. Everybody doesn't lose face. But if they're still unrepentant, they still don't want to move towards you, they still are stiff arming you, then you take it to the church. What does that look like? Again, it looks like more people coming to the place where they want to reunite this person back into the community. It's never to send them packing, it is never to ostracize. It is always to get them to move to a place of, oh, I need to change the way I interact with people. I got to stop this. But if the posture of the heart never gets there, the posture of the one who does the offense never moves, he says, well, start, if they still refuse to listen, even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. In other words, treat them like somebody who doesn't follow Jesus. Why? Because they're not following Jesus. There's no humility there. There's no sense of connection to the community in which they want to own how they are affecting the community. So treat them like that. Treat them like somebody who doesn't follow Jesus. Love them. Treat them like humans. Jesus loved tax collectors. He ate with them. One of his closest followers, Matthew, was a tax collector. So it's not like we're dealing with people as though they're disposable. It sounds that way in this passage. It's like, well, just treat them like they're not worthy. No, treat them like somebody who just doesn't know Jesus because they're acting as if they do not. Now, this idea is simple to understand, but hard to practice. So I want to take you through um, something I've known for a long time. I've read about it. I've studied. I've taught it. It's something called the Five Conflict Styles by Kenneth Thomas. Came out in 1971. I'm going to have a slide come up here, and there are 5 styles of conflict management, and it's a useful, easy to use way to understand how you step into, and it's very relevant to this conversation because what is happening when you do go talk to somebody is a conflict. And so I want to invite you into this. There's also, if you want to do more reading on it, because I'm not going to have enough time to unpack it fully, you can find it. There's a QR code that you can click on. It's 5 styles of conflict management. All this information and much more will be at that website. And it gives credit to Kenneth Thomas and all the things. So I just want you to know that that's where it comes from. This will pop up later too, so you can show it later. Um, and if you're coming up with questions, this is you can text them in. Text lines up there too. So, okay, first, there's a chart that I would like to have thrown up there. I think, there it is. Is that a great chart? No, but it's got colors and see, I'm giving credit to this guy, Kenneth Thomas. I stole it. I borrowed it. Actually, I think he'd appreciate that y'all are looking at it. Yeah. Uh, all right. There it is. Yeah, that's a conflict waiting to happen. All right. So what I would like you to at least sit with me. I'm going to explain the 5 different styles, and I specifically told you the story about my grandkids for this reason. I went through all 5 of those styles as I was trying to figure out what in the world to do, and so the axis is important. The goal or the task of what you're trying to get done goes up on the left side, and then across the bottom is the value of relationship. And so when I was growing up, I learned what is called a shark on here, competing. The goal was really important, your personal goal, whatever you were trying to get done, at the exclusion of relationship. Okay. So you compete. So that was I thought for a moment when it was with my grandkids, oh, just let them wrestle it out. Go for it. 3 kids wrestling in the playground. What could go wrong? So then uh, the one below is the turtle. That's avoiding. We just don't do conflict. That would have been all right. Nobody, nobody gets the swing. That's how I was going to resolve it. The teddy bear is accommodating. Accommodating just values the relationships above all else. That's where I was going to put them all on the swing and just say, hey, let's just everybody on the swing. Let's see if we can do this. They would have probably done it, which is really scary, but we opted not to do that because of potential people getting hurt. Fox would have been compromising, which is ultimately what I ended up doing. Was they all get 5 minutes. I'm going to time it. The owl would have been collaborating. There was no way I could get them to agree, so I moved off of collaborating, which would have been ideal. But they were not going to agree on how it was going to do. Even had to decide who was going to go first. It was it was a thing. 4, 5, and 6 years old. So go figure. So where you find yourself on this is going to be like, oh, and and you might have a skewed view of how you fit on this. You might go, oh, I'm an owl. I'm always collaborating. You're not. Nobody is. That's what the shark would say. That's right. Um, and we vacillate between 2 of these normally. We have one that we go to that we're learned, and it's our reaction to the situation. Mine is shark. I have to go, oh, okay, we're in a competition. And then I naturally go, I move through to accommodating because I I want the relationship to matter more than the goal. I want that. But then I'll I'll try to slide into the owl. So I go through these things, and you probably have one that is dominant that you learned when you were growing up. Does everybody tracking with me? Okay. You may have heard all of this before. So how does this apply to the church, and how does this apply to the passage I just read? Well, I think it applies directly because depending upon the posture that you enter into correcting anybody at any time, but mostly in this context within the church where we are brothers and sisters in Christ, where we are familiar, the the natural place that the church goes, and a church will have a preferred conflict style, by the way. All organizations do, all families do. You have a preferred one. Again, mine was shark growing up. So we look at the chart and we go, well, ideally it's okay, high goal, high relationship. There's another chart I want you to see. Looks similar to this, but it has different access. Okay. Same four boxes, five boxes, but assertiveness is on the left and cooperativeness is on the bottom. And so the more cooperative you are, you slide that way, and the more aggressive you are towards the top. And so you put these two together and you kind of go, oh, okay. So we enter into, so, thank you, some form of conflict. You win the day. That was a solution to my conflict with my throat. Being aware of this as an individual and being aware of this as an organization helps keep the unity of the church. It is not realistic to think that conflict won't enter into an organization. It is not realistic to think that it doesn't enter into a family. If you're part of a family, you experience conflict. If you're part of a church, you experience conflict. If you work somewhere, you experience conflict. If you are, the only way you don't experience conflict, never mind. Even if you're alone and you have social media, you have conflict. Conflict is just part of the deal. How you react to it and how you respond to it is what matters. And when confronted with it, what do you do with it? And so you will find that person normally when I default into my shark mode, most people avoid me. I get that because I'm not reasonable. I'm not trying to resolve conflict. I'm actually just trying to win the day. I am not trying to value you as a human. And so the reaction matches in some form or fashion the person who initiates the conflict, right? Nope. Yep. Okay. I'm getting a feeling that this room has never been in a conflict. And so we enter into this, and this is the beauty of this passage of scripture. We enter into it with a humble heart that says, look, you offended me. You sinned against me. How can we resolve it so that we both walk away winning? The owl is the goal. It's to collaborate. How do we? And so if the posture is, I want to maintain relationship. I want to keep relationship. I want to move forward. But it also, the goal is that we would resolve it. There has to be this mutual understanding of how conflict is resolved. Okay. I pastored in a church one time where the conflict style was compete. I fit right in. And what I mean by compete is like it was a very large church with a lot of different ministries, and I was the head of one of those ministries, and we were like a parachurch organization inside a bigger organization. So we would compete for resources, for people, for all kinds of things, and we would have to make every year at budget time. We would have to make our proposal in such a way that it elevated us and diminished others. It was a compete because there was limited resources. And we did the same thing with volunteers. We would compete for volunteers. We would compete. So the environment was very, very aggressive. And relationships were not the priority. And then I was in a church previous where it was avoid. We just avoided conflict. We never talked about stuff. We just let stuff. And and it boiled up and it came out sideways in places that were just really weird. Um, and I've also been in a church where it was accommodating. Relationships above all else, you can do whatever you want. We will keep the relationship without addressing the issues. So, all of those are options. All of those are possibilities, but all of them leave us in a place that feels unsatisfied unless we actually bring each other to a place of resolution. We are to forgive one another. We're to love one another. We are to bear one another's burdens. We are to do those things in such a way that it brings about unity, not uniformity. You can disagree on something and still have relationship. You can disagree and not have conflict. I know, a lot harder than it sounds. So, as you walk through this, I think part of understanding this is, what is your posture as you go through life? Are you open to the idea that you could be wrong? That somehow you did something that offended somebody? If you're actually in that posture where you can receive something where somebody sits down and says, "Hey, you offended, what you said offended me, what hurt my feelings, you sinned against me." And there is a natural response to that that says, "Oh, that was not my intention. Please forgive me. Let's walk forward together. Is there any restitution I can give you? Is there anything we need to do to restore the relationship?" That's Christian. That is following Jesus. On the other end of that spectrum is, I walk in, I go, "Look, this, what you did offended me." I don't care. There's indifference towards the offense. There's indifference to how it affected me. There is a uh, actual hostility towards me for even bringing it up. I've been in those situations. I've been in those environments. It's very, very difficult. And you walk forward with the intent of, okay, I gotta walk through this in such a way that you move towards me. How do I get that to happen? It says to bring two other people with you, not three, two. Ideally, you bring people who have seen the activity or people the other person respects. And the goal, again, is not to get them to agree to something, it is to get them to understand that their behavior is affecting the whole. And the goal is restoration to the community, not just to the individual. Now, I just gave you a ton of information, and I'll bet there's a few questions out there that it prompted. But before I do that, I want to throw one verse in there that I think sums this up, and then we'll take questions. Yeah, I'm almost out of time already. I don't talk fast enough. Colossians 3:12 through 14 says this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, his people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." I memorized this verse with the intent of the people doing it for me. When I memorized this verse in college thinking, this is how people should treat me. That's probably the wrong perspective. It'd be nice, but this is the evidence of a community that realizes that conflict happens, that wrongs happen, offenses happen, and in that is we treat each other with compassion and kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. We bear with each other. We forgive each other because it is the natural consequences of putting people together. It's social distortion. It is why Paul tells us over and over again, if you have a grievance against someone, forgive them. I think this is one of the hardest things to do as humans. Questions? Oh boy. Go ahead, Mike. Wherever you want to start.
Good morning. The
Good
question
morning.
the question I have is on that graph.
Yeah.
Let's say you find yourself in the competing category
Okay.
and you are like, that's where you go to,
Yep.
and you want to approach a situation, a conflict with somebody, and you find that they naturally are avoidant or accommodating.
Yep.
Knowing that the
It's easy to win.
right? But like, if you find yourself in a different quadrant than another person,
Mhm.
knowing that the goal is to, work together towards this,
Yeah.
but finding that there is, it's a challenge. You can work your way from competing towards collaborating,
For sure.
but it feels a little overstepping to try to force somebody from avoidance or accommodation, like to be like, hey, you need to be more accommodating or collaborating with this.
Right.
How do you work with another individual if you're finding yourselves in different quadrants?
Oh man. There you go. Um, tricky. See, because you don't want to be manipulative. And that might be the go-to is like, I think I can manipulate you into doing what I want. The invitation, it's open-handed invitation. And if we I'm put myself in this, if I go into it with competing energy, where I'm aggressive and I come into it, people will naturally gravitate to either avoid or accommodate. So the energy I bring to it matters. And so um, I've learned over the years to ask questions. I've learned to come into the situation rather than with the answer to the question, but actually a, hey, this is what happened. Can you tell me why? What happened? There's a energy that comes with being disarmed, with an inquiry rather than an accusation. Sharks come with accusations. Even if they're true, it doesn't matter. If you come with questions, it disarms the other person and it helps them engage. That would be my best advice. But ultimately, we all have to take the posture of, "Oh, okay, this person is coming to me, and I've got to at least measure what's coming after, what they're saying to me." So it's both sides. It's hard.
Here you go.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
So I grew up in a home of turtles,
Mm,
and I feel as though avoiding and accommodating are a blended category
can be.
because
Mhm.
with growing up avoiding, then you lead into accommodating because you're trying to avoid the conflict and just give them what they want to hear.
Right.
And then I have learned to do the collaborating and compromising, but my mom is the one that if you try to talk to her, she always feels attacked
Mhm.
and she would never hears.
Yeah.
And
Defensive posture.
yes,
Mhm.
always. So I have dropped contact with her, but I still talk to my siblings. But how, when you have to treat her as a tax collector, how do you get a blind person to see Jesus?
You can't. Um, I wish there was a, like, this is how you go about that. How that you pray for them, you engage with them to the level you can without allowing them to hurt you, and allow God to work in their hearts. I mean, that's just, I don't mean that to be a passive answer. I don't want you to chase after something you cannot change. Just some people just don't get it.
Kev.
He won't let me hold the mic.
I don't blame
That's right. So we talk about that.
him. Thank you.
Tim lets me hold the mic.
Tim is violating agreed upon policy.
Great. So we're going to have to confront him later. Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a recovering shark.
Oh, good.
Yes, but that's not what my question is about.
Oh,
My question is about the scripture. I think we can all get on board with like level 1 of like, okay,
Yeah.
go in good faith to your brother or sister and talk to them about how they've hurt you. But level 2, I don't think I've ever seen this done in a healthy way, and I'm wondering if you could give some examples because I'm trying to conceptualize like going to a friend or a parent and like having done that and them not being willing to hear you. And then, like, where do you even find this person who's like, yes, and in good faith, we're going to go back and try again? Like, what if you don't have another person who is willing to do that? Because that's a lot to ask of a second person, because most people don't want to deal with that type conflict in that way. So I am very like skeptical of how this plays out in reality.
Sure. Skeptical is a good word. For whatever this is worth, I am often the second person. People have a tendency to ask me to come with them in those moments of, I've talked to them, I don't know what to do, would you come with me and talk with them? You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be that person at times. Maybe you are a lawyer. Are you? Not licensed. Okay. There is moments in time, like countless times within the church, a marriage is going through a breakup, or they separate, or they whatever. One spouse has talked to the other spouse endlessly. They have a natural tendency to draw one of us in or two of us in to say, hey, can we talk together? Can we bring resolution before this is irreparable? And so the idea of bringing trusted people in is that idea. Or I've brought my sibling in on a conversation with one of my other siblings, in our family set. So I think it's people with knowledge of the situation, people who handle those things well, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But again, we're dealing with and Jesus followers, not with people out. That was one of the caveats that makes it. And so you appeal to their faith, you appeal to their relationship with Jesus. You don't just appeal to their good nature or try to explain to them if they're following Jesus and what they did was egregiously wrong and they're not willing to engage with that. I That's a pretty easy. No, easy's wrong. It's a pretty straightforward conflict. I don't know if that helps at all.
She said it does. Hold
Okay.
on.
Thanks,
Does
Mike.
Sam have somebody?
Yeah,
on that side?
we got one over here,
Okay.
right here, Kev.
And then we
to
got
your
one
right.
over here.
So my question is about the passage itself. So I think most people have heard this passage as more of a mini manual for church discipline.
A what?
Church discipline.
Oh, right.
And I think you came out of this from more of a personal conflict.
Yeah.
And that passage, I've actually seen it used in a way that actually has hurt people in the past.
For sure.
So I'm just curious how.
That's what I'm trying to avoid doing.
Right. So I'm just curious, is this one of those passages where we've kind of just accepted as, oh, this is how you treat people in the church, and ostracize them or correct them or whatnot, or
right?
Or was Jesus' intent more just like, this is personal conflict, not necessarily this is how you. I mean, he does mention the church in there, but I guess can you comment more about that?
Okay.
In terms of like, is it more for just one-on-one personal or more individual, or is it more just like, okay, this is how?
Initially, I think it is. I think the design of this is to put the onus on the person that's been offended, because people go through life offended and never say anything. I would prefer, if I offended somebody, for them to come up and say, hey, Kev, that's offensive, stop doing that. I would prefer that, because then I can treat you better. Then I can be in relationship with you in such a way that it actually complements the whole rather than causes rifts within. A lot of times that's what happens in community, is that individuals, and then they align people with them against the other person. That's what he's trying to avoid, is this division within a community that is rooted in this idea that people take sides on something that could have been easily resolved between two people. And so he goes, resolve it before it blows up and affects the whole. And then if you see it affecting the whole, you bring the two people and go, look, this is affecting the community. You gotta stop doing this. This is gonna cause problems. And then ultimately, because it's affecting the whole, it comes to the church. That's the progression. It is usually, in our culture, never gets there because people just leave. They can just go down to the church down the street. I don't have to participate in this, and I can be that way over there. And I don't have to face and change and realign and unpack some of the things that I need to do that affect a community I'm a part of. That's the goal, because if unity is truly the goal, and there is just this quiet um, acceptance of all the rifts that are going on within the community, it's not really a community. It's just a group of individual people that gather together. That makes sense? I think that's what he's after. He and and when he says treat him like a pagan or a tax collector, if you read how Jesus treated pagans and tax collectors, he loved them. So it's not a the goal is never to put people out. The goal is reconciliation. The goal is forgiveness. The goal is unity. And so this is supposed to at least move in the heart of the person who's a Jesus follower to go, yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm gonna change the way I live.
All right.
Mike?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yes?
Lucius.
Oh, Lucius. Uh-oh.
All right, so Gnosticism? You want me to go
No.
Gnosticism right now?
No.
It does not apply.
Yeah.
So
I was trying to be really practical today.
no, you are being very practical,
Okay.
and I have a practical question.
Okay.
So when we got to treat them as a pagan or tax collector,
Yes.
and like you're right, Jesus treated them with love and welcome and hospitality.
As humans.
We don't do that at all, and I see how that can be quickly weaponized by the church quickly saying like, "Oh, if you're not willing to resolve this conflict, you're not a Christian."
Mm-hmm.
And we see that in other areas in America, just like if you don't follow this theology, this tradition, you must not be a Christian. So,
Right.
like, how do we avoid falling into that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it goes back to this idea that we are to forgive like Jesus forgave. We are to love like Jesus loved. We are to be people that express that in our community in such a way that it reflects the heart of God. I think what ends up happening, and I've had to do this a couple of times in my history of being a pastor, is I've had to go and talk to people who are doing just what you said. So that becomes the conflict. That becomes the conversation. Hey, you really can't just throw people under the bus. Let's talk that through. And oftentimes they don't realize they're doing it. There is a degree of gossip that usually takes place within a community, and you got to address that. I mean, and so you can't just pretend it doesn't happen. That is my answer, because it's going to happen. And so you've got to address it like you would any other conflict or any other sin or any other thing. You got to be able to be willing to say something. That would be my best bet.
Here you go, Kev.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Scott.
I just wanted to commend you and Mike and Susie just for the atmosphere of loving one another, respecting one another, whether you agree or not.
Yeah.
And I that's refreshing, number one. How do you deal with the issue of how people equate disagreement and personalize it,
Yeah.
and then hate you or condemn you, because you're not
in agreement?
You don't agree on every single point of every single issue.
Yeah. How do I deal with that, or what do I? Yeah.
Well, taking what you've spoken
just
of,
said, what I've just said.
What you just spent the last 30 minutes on, how would you?
Sure,
now
you're going to
resolve
throw that back at me. I think this is the moment in where we are in the world, where unity has turned into uniformity. Agreement is mandatory on even the minutia of life in order for us to be friends, or to be even in relationship, or even be acquaintances, or go to the same church or whatever. That's what you're referring to. Yeah. And so, as best I can, try to live at peace with everybody, and have a minimal amount of requirements of agreement. There are some things I have to agree on if you're going to say you're part of the church, and Jesus is one of those things, right? So at the end of the day, it takes two to tango. It takes two to dance. It takes two to get there. If the heart of the other person can't get there, this goes back to that. There's no, that I pray for them. I keep them at arm's length because they influence the whole. But I don't let them infiltrate the inner part of of the of the community that I'm a part of for the sake of the community.
Well, and then would you distinguish that between the local community that you're a part of, and then any responsibility to address the church at large? I mean,
yeah,
I kind of lean toward deal with where you are.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not my responsibility what's happening somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, I'm just sad about that. Honestly, just really sad. I don't know what to do about that. We talk about it once in a while, and I also don't want to assume that I'm right for everybody, and that's part of the dilemma, right? You can disagree with me on all kinds of theological points, but that's okay. That's fine. That's not true across the board, and so there's a posture of you have to enter into that with a posture of humility, and some people just can't, and they won't. And so this community is having conversations like this because we want to hold that as open as possible. You don't even have to agree with anything I said today, and I'm okay. Okay.
Thanks.
That's a hard question. I think we probably need to go to music now. Is there any more? Is there one more?
I mean, there are.
I figured there would be.
But do you?
One more.
Okay.
Oh, I would like to back up to.
I'm holding the mic. Okay. Can we just establish that? All right. I don't trust you. All right. So I'm holding it.
You hold
Don't
the mic.
comment on it every time I'm holding the microphone.
I wanted to actually back up to your swing story.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm in the game now.
Yeah. And
that's the best part of this sermon.
There's a aspect of it that I think is underlying all of it that is so taken for granted, especially maybe even you and your grandchildren.
Yeah.
Because it's just something we don't even think about. And that is, I'm wondering if you felt that the only reason you could compromise, or they could compromise, or the only reason that anyone could even collaborate and unify was because you all have unconditional love for each other. That even though they viewed each other as enemies, and I'm assuming that
competitors. Let's go with competitors.
Yeah,
yes.
That they only were able to come together because they have this unconditional love for each other.
It helps, no doubt. They love each other. There is no doubt about that. I think it worked because the compassionate dictator that was there didn't give them a lot of options. But yes, they do love each other. Let's pray. Lord, thanks for this time. Thanks that we could have this conversation. I have no idea if this helped anybody in the room, but I hope it did. Lord, use this in our lives as we come to the table and are reminded that we are all forgiven. So giving out forgiveness is not foreign to you, and it shouldn't be foreign to us. That you were sinned against, but yet you forgive. That we are sinned against, so we forgive. That we own what it is that we do in such a way that we hold it with humility. That even when we offend people and we don't mean to, that we own it. And we become people of the cross. We become people who live like you did. We become people who, with humble feet and humble lives, that we treat each other with deep respect, that we also treat the community with deep respect, and that there would not be lingering grudges and rifts among us, that all that would be put down, and that there would be unity around you and what you did for us on a cross. May we celebrate that well as we take communion this morning. In Jesus' name.